guess what? I'm right. Tesla's steer-by-wire is still a load of absolute rubbish. Just like the car, looks like a skip bin, and inside the skip bin is some rubbish. It's the steer-by-wire system, and I'm here to talk even more about it, because the last video got a lot of comments, and pretty much everyone else agrees steer-by-wire rubbish. And some, however, made some good arguments in favour of it that are still wrong, but they're good arguments, while others, they missed the point, and then there's some who obviously clicked the video, started writing a comment before they even watched it, not realising that I addressed the exact point they're making in their comment in the video they're watching. But anyway, before I change this channel's format to what I have now, I used to read out lots of comments from people, which I enjoy doing. Itself, that's one of the funniest things I've read in a while, but that section of the video never got a lot of watch time and basically made the videos perform badly, but this video is all about responding to arguments in favour of Tesla's absurd steer-by-wire system and steer-by-wire in general, regardless of what car you put it in, because I am talking about Tesla's system because it's the most notable, but this applies to every brand, so everyone's got, oh, you're just hating Tesla because Elon Musk decided to... No, it's shit in a Lexus, it's shit in the Mercedes concept car, it's shit in an Infiniti, it's shit in whatever car you put it in. Steer-by-wire is really stupid, okay? So, I'll start with an actually smart comment, because I'm not just going to cherry pick the most insane comments I can find so I can make the other side look stupid, because that'd be lame as fuck. I'm going to actually pick the smart comments. With that being said, finding comments in favour of steer-by-wire has been pretty tricky because pretty much everyone in the comment section agreed steer-by-wire is a nonsense piece of technology. So here's a comment that I found. Cars today almost all use throttle-by-wire. Some cars already use brake-by-wire, also used for the rear wheels in F1. Both technologies allow for finely tuned computer intervention, providing safety and efficiency benefits while reducing mechanical complexity. Space is at a premium, especially in electric vehicles, and therefore eliminating one constraint on the arrangement of components is something that will probably be embraced by more manufacturers in the near future. Steer-by-wire is also a logical step towards self-driving vehicles. Ugh, why would I want that? Which is something manufacturers pursue. Terrible decision that, by the way. And while aeroplanes are not a good analogy, they still prove that something like this can be done safely. Additionally, in modern vehicles there are already many computer inputs interfering with the steering, self-parking, lane assist, whatever. Again, I'd rather modern cars didn't have these either. First of all, throttle-by-wire is entirely safe because when it fails, the system's default position is 0. So it can only cause a car to be temporarily inoperable. It can leave you on the side of the road, but throttle-by-wire is not really that dangerous. Worst case scenario, if you've just pulled out onto a busy road. But even then, you should be pulling out into a gap where if your engine quits or the throttle fails or anything else happens, and just remember with the manual gearbox you might stall pulling out of an intersection and be stationary, so you should have that sort of safety margin. You should be pulling out into a gap where if your engine quits as you pull out, whether that be a throttle-by-wire failing or you stalling or something else going wrong with the engine, the other cars should be able to brake in time before they get to you. Brake-by-wire systems are a bit more tricky. I'm not a big fan of them. It often leads to weird braking behaviour and it does feel a bit unnecessary. I understand why they have it. So it's mostly for hybrids and EVs, so you can combine regen with the friction braking. But if you experience BBW failure on the road, you have two alternative methods of control. You have engine braking in a petrol car or regen braking in an electric car. You're out of luck with a diesel, so don't put brake-by-wire in a diesel. But you also then have the ability to steer the car evasively and to scrub off speed if you want, or if a collision is inevitable, you can steer it towards whatever object will be less of a severe collision. You also have the handbrake, which is a secondary system. Either it's mechanical like all handbrakes should be because mechanical handbrakes are just better, or it's a stupid electronic one. If it's mechanical, you'll have to be very gentle with it as it's not meant to be used as a brake to stop the car, but just to hold it or aid in tight turns if you're feeling particularly illegal, but it will stop you if your main brakes fail. And if it's one of those moronic electric handbrakes that manufacturers insist on having, those are always on a completely different system to the main brakes. So the failure will always be isolated to one or the other. It's not the same as a steering failure where your course is set and your only option is max brakes. The system also doesn't really save much space because it only really removes a small section of the steering column. It doesn't remove... I mean, you've got half the steering column from the steering wheel to the sensor. You've got the steering rack. There's like this one tiny bit of the system that it removes. It's like one bit of metal because it's got all the other elements of a steering system still. So it's not simplicity. I've got another comment though. The loss of force feedback resulting in incorrect steering input would surely also apply to power steering. Inverse problem, you'd suddenly steer too little, but still causing a crash. To this I'd say, yeah, power steering failure is a risk of having a power steering system, especially with the modern power steering systems which are overly assisted. But it's less so because when you feel that the steering is getting heavier, it suddenly gets heavier and your steering position starts to reduce from the amount of pressure you have. You won't overcorrect the other way with too much steering, since you'll still have that steering feedback feel. You'll be able to feel what happens, so you've just got to really put some force into it as the steering becomes heavier. But it's harder to overcorrect and put too much steering into it from correcting from the backing off of the steering angle that's going to come when the power steering fails. So yes, power steering failure does cause crashes, but it's not as dangerous as having a force feedback failure in a steer-by-wire system. Steering feedback is extremely important because it's how you can tell what your front wheels are doing, what your slip angle is, where the bumps are. And this is a big issue that I see with these steer-by-wire systems, is they market it as things like vibration free, and you don't feel any of the bumps and other things that you usually get through the steering, which to somebody who knows absolutely nothing about cars, that sounds fantastic. Oh hell yeah, my steering wheel's going to be really easy to turn and it has no connection. But you've got to actually have that information. You need that information. And yes, they have force feedback to bring some of that information back, but they're still dumping a load of this information intentionally and using this loss of steering information as a marketing point. They're saying that like it's a good thing. Now, theoretically, you don't have to do it like this, but they are doing it like this. Anyway, so he went on to say, I do note that the Cybertruck has rear-wheel steering, which could be difficult to link mechanically. Is mechanical rear-wheel steering a thing? I can imagine that you'd also want to computer control that and have it only operate at low speed. Anyway, digital fly-by-wire wasn't developed to save weight or for large aircraft. It was developed for space flight and more complex programmable inputs, inherently unstable aircraft. Would you want features analogous to this on a truck? I wouldn't, but I can see that maybe in a performance car that changes the Ackermann geometry with speed. That could be a benefit from digital drive-by-wire. That's actually a very interesting point. Variable Ackermann could be interesting. That'd be pretty cool to have. Although you could also do things like toe in, toe out. Although steer-by-wire won't achieve variable Ackermann angles if you use the Lexus or the Tesla system. Because both systems, they use a traditional steering rack powered by electric motors with both the front wheels linked in terms of the steering. So they won't add any extra capabilities for something like variable Ackermann. But I guess you could get variable Ackermann with or without steer-by-wire. With a traditional steering column, if you added some more hinges and actuators here and there in the right places, but I think it'd add too much weight doing that. Variable Ackerman would be useful, but probably I'd rather not. You could do it if you got rid of the steering rack altogether though, and had the steering actuators on each wheel hub. But then you'd need 4 steering motors on the front, since each front wheel would need double redundancy, and then you'd have even more weight as a result, plus new failure points if the 2 front wheels ever got desynchronized from each other, so you'd need even more redundancies on that. But in terms of the car's stability, you don't need a steering computer to ensure stability. ESC already allows a car's computer to control it in yaw using asymmetric brake force. If you get into a slide, it will use the brakes on one wheel to correct the slide. In fact, some road cars are what you would refer to as inherently unstable. For example, the Porsche 911, which is tail heavy. Older 911s had famously dangerous handling on the road. This handling was good on a racetrack, it was great, and the GT cars, their GT3 cars and that, they still have that classic 911 handling characteristics, but many classic Porsches were crashed because of the car's tail heaviness, which made massive amounts of oversteer. The classic 911s were very tricky to drive for a lot of drivers, but new 911s don't have this issue on the road because of ESC, which doesn't need steer-by-wire because it's done with differential braking, but that's the car essentially doing something which is analogous to what you'd find in a fly-by-wire system where it will have flight envelope protection. Well, electronic stability control is the same thing as that, so this really further adds to the point that the argument that steer-by-wire is good because planes have fly-by-wire really just makes no sense, because cars can achieve that effect a different way. Also, the amount of comments I got on that video claiming that steer-by-wire is good because planes have fly-by-wire is ridiculous. I very directly addressed this argument in my video, yet people continue to just say without addressing a single point in the video. Another thing that a lot of people mentioned was four-wheel steering, and how that could be possible without steer-by-wire. This is where ideally you'd use a combined mechanical and steer-by-wire system. If you have rear steer-by-wire but the front's mechanical, you don't need to have the same level of redundancies if the front is still mechanical, because you've got that steering column in there. And you don't need a steering force feedback motor and a sensor for what the rear wheels are doing, because the front wheels have all the useful information. So a combined system like this animation from Audi shows, and of course it's Audi because it's always Audi making these really useful 3D animations of how their cars work, because at least some companies are proud of their mechanical engineering. Unlike Tesla, whose video simply explains that turning the steering wheel will make the wheels turn. Because let's be real here, software engineers, they're not real engineers, they're programmers. I don't know who decided to start calling programmers software engineers, but stop it. I mean, I study economics, but you're not going to hear me calling myself an economy engineer any day. The trouble is, when you get a tech company to make cars, they don't make engineering decisions based on what's actually important. They're very focused. Tech companies in this are very focused on their products being essentially closed boxes. So you're not supposed to know what's going on underneath. They're supposed to be magical things that just do something and you don't know how it works. Which is why Tesla's not really interested in showing off the internals of their mechanical engineering the way a company like Audi is, because they're, or Lexus as well, their steer-by-wire system, they'll show all the insides of it. And I don't know if the RZ, can you actually buy it with this steer-by-wire system? I saw the concept being tested in Spain by a bunch of journalists. I haven't heard any news about this car actually going on sale with this as an option, and how many people have actually selected this option, because you can get it with proper steering as well. But anyway, tech companies, they just want to make closed boxes, and they like to add random gimmicks to cars that don't achieve anything at all other than being able to say, oh, look how high tech we are. we incorporated a feature that aeroplanes have had since 1979, but in a way more shittier and boring way. But anyway, that's what happens when you let a tech company design a car.